Now 6:30 and a quorum of members is present, so the meeting of the Board of Education of the School District of New Berlin is called to order. Please call the roll.
Ms. Crosby.
Here.
Mr. Helmer.
Here.
Mr. Kurth.
Here.
Ms. Manley. Ms. Schulz.
Here.
Ms. Unger.
Here.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Ms. Wondercheck is attending virtually today, so she will be here, but attending over the phone. I would entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session.
Mr. President, I move to recess into closed session pursuant to Section 19.851C, E, and F of the Wisconsin statutes to consider A, the approval of closed session minutes of August 24th, 2020, and B, employment, performance, and compensation matters pertaining to staff. And that's all.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Mr. Helmer. Please call the roll.
Mr. Kurth. Yes. Mr. Helmer.
Yes.
Ms. Crosby.
Yes.
Ms. Manley. Ms. Schulz.
Yes.
Ms. Unger.
Yes.
We are moving into closed session and we'll return to open session around 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 7 p.m. and we are returning from closed session into open session. In recognition of the serious and important nature of our efforts here, we will join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please rise. And now for those who wish to prepare for the meeting, we will have a moment of silence. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, notice was given to the public last Friday by posting the agenda at each district school, the district office, and the agenda was also posted on the district website. A copy of the agenda was forwarded to the Journal-Sentinel, the Waukesha Freeman, and the Waukesha Now, all of which have filed requests for all public notices. You do not have privilege of the floor. So that will bring us to our administrative team report.
At this time, I'd like to invite Principal Lindner from Orchard Lane Elementary School to come up and introduce our guests. And as per what we had started last year, we will be getting elementary school updates throughout the school year. And I think this first one from Orchard Lane will certainly be a unique one, just like our unique school year.
Good evening, everybody. It is definitely an honor to be here with you this evening to give our very first kind of board update from Orchard Lane. We decided, since we really had two completely different environments going, we wanted to have two updates. So I want to introduce you first to one of our sixth graders who is attending virtually. His name is Belgute Ganochir. And he is going to, you can actually watch the video of, we just did kind of a recorded Google Hangout together for the board update from Belgute. So I will have Dan take it away from here.
Good evening, everybody. This is Mr. Lindner, principal at Orchard Lane Elementary School, and I'm here with a very, very special superstar guest speaker today. I'm here with Belgute Ganochir, and he is going to be giving us a perspective of a student at sixth grade at Orchard Lane who is taking a virtual, the distance learning side of school here for the 2021 school year. So I'm going to lead him in with a couple of questions and then kind of just give the floor to him and let him speak to some of the things that he has really experienced as a virtual student in the school district. All right, Belgute, are you ready, bud?
Yes.
All right, here we go. First question. So if you could just please describe for everyone just what your experience has been like as a virtual student, both what has been good and what are some of the things that you would like to see improved?
My experience with distance learning has actually been pretty good so far. I've been able to get to all my assignments and submit them, and I think that it's really just been a good year. And one of the best things about distance learning, I think, is the fact that you can finish at like 12. So you can finish really, really early. However, there's also the fact that you can finish actually later than you would in person, because sometimes sometimes there may be like tech problems, or you just don't know what to do and you have to ask and something like that. And one of the things I would like to see improved is like the accessibility. I think you call it, because I have to go to like ClassLink, and then I have to go to Classroom and Google Classroom, and then I have to go all the way to Canvas, and it's kind of all over the place. So if I would make one change, I would make it so that most of the classes are on one platform and not spread out across different apps.
That's excellent feedback. I know that we are, looking to do as much work on Canvas as we can. You mentioned, Belgute, you mentioned that technology. Have you been able to get help when you needed it?
Um, not really. I sometimes ask my friends, however, they don't reply, and so I don't really do that often. And whenever I really need help, I don't really ask. I'm not a person who like asks for help like always when I need help. Sometimes I can figure it out on my own. Sometimes um I can't, and it's kind of all over the place, and it it isn't as reliable as other things, I guess you could say.
Sure. Okay. No, I completely understand. And you know what? We'll definitely want to have you have a place where you can go and get that help when you need it, because we do have lots of people that are willing to make sure that that goes as smoothly as possible. Um, have you been able to have access to your teachers during your virtual distance learning?
Yes, I have. On the app called Google Hangouts, I have a hangout with Mrs. Minturn, just me and Mrs. Minturn. I have a homeroom, which is all of Mrs. Minturn, all of Mrs. Minturn's homeroom class, which I am in, and I have Math 6-7A, which is also Mrs. Mrs. Minturn's um class. And for Mrs. Calvino, classroom is one way to ask questions and receive feedback. So I think I do have the ability to ask help from my teachers if I need to.
That's awesome. That's definitely what we want. Is there anything else that you can tell us about your experience as a virtual student so far in the school district?
Not really. Most of the weeks have been kind of the same thing. The only real there actually isn't actually anything that anything that is like that has stood out, or anything that I really needed to address.
All right. Well, hey, I just want to say on behalf of the entire school district how much we appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening. We will definitely, take your feedback into account and really work on making sure that we can get questions answered for you and your other fellow students who are in the virtual setting right now. But we definitely want to make sure it's a great experience for you. So your words tonight have been very helpful. So if you would do me a favor and just say bye to everyone so they can see your face one more time.
Bye.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Have a great night.
You too.
So when we started looking at sixth graders on our Orchard Lane list of students that were like, hey, we need to have somebody who's going to be someone very comfortable speaking with an adult and just being very open and very honest. We had one of our fifth grade teachers and Mrs. Will looking at the list like, oh, Belgute, perfect. So he did a great job. And, one of the things that he had said that we wanted to make sure we're really clear on was the help piece. He's like, hey, I'm not one to ask. I ask my friends for help, and sometimes they get back to me, sometimes they don't. But we really want to make it clear that, that the help piece for our virtual students is really important to us. And so we want to make sure that we follow through with talking to Belgute and any of our other virtual students who are looking to get that help that they need in order for their experience to go smoothly. So we also have a student with us tonight, Gigi, if you want to come on up. So Gigi Canariato is one of she's also, she does some virtual work as well because she's one of our students who is taking 7B8, Math 7B8, as a sixth grader. So she has the perspective of both a virtual student and also an in-person student. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Gigi. They're all yours.
Hi, my name is Gigi, and I would like to start by thanking my principal and my sixth grade teachers for giving me this opportunity to speak here tonight. So I would like to start by saying, talking about the precautions that Orchard Lane is taking to stop the spread of COVID. So we are all wearing masks during school, which can get somewhat annoying during PE and physical and recess because you're doing exercise. And we also, in 6th grade, have plexiglass because we don't have separate desks. We have tables, so we're using plexiglass to divide our workstations. So we are also constantly washing our hands, but you gotta work with what you got. It can sometimes get annoying, and then I would also like to talk about Math 7B8. So instead of busing to Eisenhower like we normally would, we are doing virtual. So we are using an app called Edgenuity, which can sometimes get somewhat annoying if there are tech malfunctions or if you have a lot of work that you have to do. And we don't necessarily have our own teacher that's teaching us lessons. We have a teacher that is making the lessons for teaching purposes and not necessarily a teacher making the lessons and then giving them to us. So I would also like to talk about something that becoming a 6th grader, I am now taking on some roles and responsibility. I'm also taking on the role of being a role model for the younger students, because I remember when I was in the lower half of the building, so 3rd grade from kindergarten, I was always looking up to the 6th graders and saying, wow, they're so cool, I want to be just like them. And when I was a 3rd grader, my sister was actually a 6th grader, and she's still a big role model for me right now. So to shift to something else that's new is our new principal and our new vice principal. So they are handling disruptive kids much better than in past years, because instead of bringing a teacher in to talk to them in the classroom, they're removing them from the learning area so it's less disruptive to the other kids. However, if you follow our school values, you will earn a STAR ticket. So for our school, we do STAR tickets where if you're following our school values, you will earn a STAR ticket. So if you're being respectful, safe, kind, and overall a good student, you will earn a STAR ticket. And it's also teaching you that if you do those core values, you won't always get a STAR ticket, but even if no one's watching, you should still do those core values. So I would like to thank my teachers and you for your attention tonight, and I was wondering if you guys had any questions for me.
Can I just real quick, over here. So can you talk a little bit more about your math experience and, what are your thoughts on how are things going with it?
So I don't necessarily like how math is going so far. It's kind of been a struggle because for most of the week we only have 30 minutes to work on our math because we do a 30-minute Zoom call with our teacher. So we only have 30 minutes on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. On Monday and Friday, however, we do have all our time, so an hour to work on it. And then we also, this past week, we got assigned 3 topics to work on. So it was rational numbers and fractions. So sometimes there were problems with how it was working and how long it would take me. So I missed a couple assignments, so now I still have to catch up on those assignments. And it can take a while to do that, but I guess I just have to get my flow down, which is kind of what I'm struggling with.
And I appreciate your feedback, and I think like Mr. Lindner mentioned with the student that was doing full virtual, we really appreciate your feedback because this is all new to us too. And we're trying to make sure, and this is probably last week was the first week we actually had everybody back in school that was supposed to be, that didn't fully opt out. We're making changes as we go, and I would encourage you to talk to Mr. Lindner about any suggestions you might have, and he knows a lot of people, and he'll be able to help us with things too, so.
Okay.
So thanks for your feedback.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Next, we have our update from your representative from Eisenhower, Nishi.
Hi everyone, my name is Nishu Upadhyay and I am the representative for New Berlin Eisenhower. And I'll be providing some updates related to some athletics and activities that have been going on in the Ike community. To begin, boys varsity soccer tied with New Berlin West with the final score of 1-1 and beat Arrowhead 2-1 last week. Eisenhower is hosting a virtual production of You're Driving Me Crazy and are having auditions next week. Girls varsity tennis are the 2020 Woodland Conference champs and recently had a 7-0 win against Lake Country and Milwaukee Lutheran. Varsity boys volleyball is currently undefeated and recently beat South Milwaukee 3-0. They have a game tonight against West Iowa Central and Whitnall. Overall, there has been a great and safe start to the year.
There it was, short and sweet. But I can tell you there's a lot of great things happening at Eisenhower beyond just the things that she had mentioned. And did want to remind you that at the next meeting, you will have your new board representative here from New Berlin West at the next meeting. So not sure if she will be here virtually via recording or virtually or here in person, but we'll make sure that we have her presence either way. I'll defer my updates to the agenda.
All right, that brings us to our item 9, district reports. Are there any items that should be pulled out for separate consideration?
Yeah, I had a question about the enrollment reports, Joe.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm pulling it up right now. So the numbers from June to September, it looks like they dropped about 110 students. Is that common in most years, or is that an anomaly for this year?
It is not common. What I can share with you is, we do plan on providing a more full update to the board related to enrollment, but in 17-18, so trying to go back to see if this is a common thing. In 17-18, we had 4,416 FTE. We went from 4,416 to 4,445 in 18-19. So we saw a nice increase of about 30 FTE in that 1 year. From 18-19 to 19-20, we saw another modest increase from 4,445 to 4,462. So again, we were having slight increases, which actually prior to that, we had seen major decreases. And then as you are aware, so we took that trend, we also took the study that we did last year, and we actually projected a modest increase of 7 heading into the current school year. So what we assumed in the preliminary budget and what we assumed moving forward was, again, a modest increase. We are unfortunately currently at, so we went from 4,462 down to 4,351, and these are unofficial numbers, but they're going to be pretty close to this. So certainly Patrick has some time right now to work with Diana and other office staff to determine, to make it more official for the third Friday count. But you're seeing a significant decrease. We're down approximately 111 FTEs. So, Mitch, you compared it from June to September, but from last September to this September, it was 111 FTE that we are down.
Yeah, I was just trying to make heads or tails of it, and I was trying to kind of gleam out like what schools got hit harder, and it looks like Poplar Creek got hit really bad. But it's weird because it's not like kindergarten numbers are just down. Like we didn't get as many as we thought we would have. I mean, we lost 14 second graders.
That's correct.
And
so, there are basically 2 schools that we saw a significant impact where the majority of the 111 FTE came from. Like you just said, Mitch, Poplar Creek, we have 35 less students. What we do know about Poplar Creek is that we have the most transient population of students in that school area, mainly because of the multifamily housing that we have within that school boundary. So that's certainly an influx up and down, which is constant, but this was a pretty significant drop down compared to previous years. And like you said, of the 35 that we have less, the major one was in that second grade class that you mentioned. And so some of the things, and then the second school where we saw a major shift was Eisenhower. We actually have 55 less FTE in Eisenhower this year than we had last year. Yeah, there's a couple factors with that. Two of the biggest factors are, number one, you had a very large graduating class last year. And then coupling that with less sixth graders coming into seventh grade. So not only did you have, again, that big group leave, you also had a drop in the amount of students that were in sixth grade that were feeding into Ike going into seventh grade. So if you take that total of about 111 and take this 55 and about 35, that's 90 of the 110. And then the other four schools are kind of like a sprinkling of, so, but the biggest ones were Ike and Poplar Creek. Patrick will be working with staff to kind of dig a little deeper to try and find out the root cause. Now, we're not necessarily going to do like exit interviews, but we certainly, are going to ask people like, hey, Royce, or, the principals, like, what do you know about this family? What happened here? What do you, anecdotally, we are aware of some, like less than a handful of students that homeschooled instead of coming to school. Now, could that number be higher because of COVID? That's possible. We're not aware of that, but that's still stuff we need to validate. So what I will tell you then too, another thing that we had talked about with Patrick, as we saw this major drop that you also caught here, Mitch, is how did we do compared, and I'm looking at my phone because that's where my notes are. I'm not checking my
Checking your fantasy scores there or what?
No. But, really we looked at the, not only did we look at the trends previously, but we also looked at the baseline model of the applied population study that we had done. And, and studies are studies. They're the best guesses, right? And they're based on trends, which, I think back to your point, Mitch, like, is this an anomaly? Yes, it is, especially as of late. And so, we used the baseline model, which was the kind of like the conservative model, and they overestimated the amount of students that we had coming in from the elementary by 79, and they overestimated by 79, and they underestimated at the secondary by 41, which makes a difference of about 38. So even there, and they're the experts, right? And so even there was a discrepancy which is not typical. And again, I think what we would suggest is kind of like anything that you looked at with the budget at the budget presentation, if you do any sort of comparison this year to last year, there's going to be major discrepancies because last year was a weird year. You almost have to go back 2 years back to be able to kind of get a better idea of, okay, where are we at and why are the numbers, so crazy compared to last year? Well, if you go back 2 years, a typical year, the numbers aren't completely out of line. So we will certainly continue to dig deeper to find out more. But certainly, Mitch, any other questions as of now or anything else that you'd like to see that we can bring back to you? Like I said, we plan on bringing kind of a more detailed report presentation to the board at the next meeting. But anything in particular that you would want to see or have?
Yeah, I think the number one is Eisenhower's senior class looks like it dropped 15 kids, I think. That number jumps out at me quite a bit, but then West seems to be way up.
Right.
So those two, and then I guess if you can do some sort of comparisons of comparable districts, are we losing kids to private schools is the number one question, or are people staying home? And I don't think we're losing a whole lot to homeschooling, like you said. I'm sure there's a few. I don't think it's 100 though. And I'm just trying to figure out, is this Pareto look like 80% on one thing, or is this just, did we lose 113 kids to 113 different reasons?
Good question. Right. So, and again, Patrick at the next meeting will get into more of the detail of what this has as an impact financially, because it's not necessarily 111 times the 11,600 per student. That's, because now you're talking membership numbers, FTE, and what Diana was just clarifying is that these are actual butts and seats. They're not necessarily membership numbers. And Patrick will actually, again, as part of the next meeting, before we have you approve the original budget in the second meeting in October, he'll give you the lowdown of the financial impact, which is not, again, 111 times 11,600. It's much less. It's much less than that, but essentially, when I kind of cornered Patrick earlier, what is the financial impact roughly going to be? And we're looking at an impact, and if you're talking about a $65 to $70 million budget, a net of $265,000 roughly. But again, we can make that up quite easily in the broader capacity of the budget. So
Yeah, it's not so much the 1 year thing. Is this a trend? I mean,
That's correct.
Are we going to be down every year? Is it going to be 200 kids next year? All of a sudden, are we going to have these kids back in the school system?
And that's what that's where we need to kind of keep a good eye, like what's going to happen, say in January, like as the school year progresses. Well, first of all, what happened? Secondly, where are we going to end up in January? Where do we end up like next September? Because again, like you're exactly what you said, Mitch. If the numbers continue to go down, now it could be a financial impact. Now, one of the things with that we've done in the past, though, and I'm going to use Susan's words, you right size. So if you have declining enrollment, you need less staff, and so you make adjustments, that way as needed. But again, that's not what we want to see. We want to continue to see that enrollment trend go up. And again, certainly this is not what we had expected.
Because the other thing too is with Poplar Creek, I know, what's that private school by City Hall? Star of Bethlehem just built a big addition, and I'm guessing that would be a big chunk out of possibly Poplar Creek. So I guess that would be another thing to look at too, is that where we lost a lot of kids from? Completely anecdotal, but just one of the things I'd like to look into.
Yeah, one of the other things that we looked at too was, did we have a major shift of kids open and rolling out? And we did not. So that was a piece of data, Dana, right? That open enrollment isn't significantly different than in years past.
That's pretty been pretty stable.
So, but again, we'll bring you a more detailed report. So going into the original budget, what happened with enrollment, or at least the best guess that we have at this time, and then the impact that it'll have before you approve that budget at the second meeting in October. If you have additional questions between now and the next meeting, please let me know. We appreciate that.
Will do. Thanks.
All right. Continuing with the district reports, Mr. Kurth, can you please read the donation report?
Yes, I can. From the Kello Corporation, Advanta-Clean in suburban Milwaukee, for support-free and reduced lunch program, it was $2,000. And then for the New Berlin Junior Women's Club to New Berlin West, support for the Community Co-op Fund was $300. New Berlin West from Ascension, to support athletics, they donated $1,000. Ascension also donated $6,000 to West for the support of softball field updates. And for New Berlin West, again, Ron, pardon me if I wreck your name, Clohesi, support of the Performing Arts Center, he donated $250, and we thank you very much for your donations.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any items that should be pulled out for separate consideration? Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Mr. Helmer. Any discussion? Okay, this will be, so all those in favor, raise your right hand. Hands down. Chrislyn, what is your vote? Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Brings us to our regular agenda. The first item is the long-range facility plan update.
And I'll keep this brief, actually. So as the board is aware, we are now able to have $250,000 in capital projects dollars set aside, unlike previous years. We were able to do that based on a lot of moving parts. You can say it's one thing or the other, but we now have that allocated in the budget. As we have mentioned, we do not plan on moving forward with those projects until we know exactly roughly what the impact COVID will have, not only on the budget, but also on the state budget. As of right now, as Patrick mentioned at the budget hearing, we're feeling like things will be stable this year. In future years, that could be a different story, but we're gonna talk about this year. And so essentially, we're gonna wait until at least the spring to move forward with the projects that we'd like to move forward with. Those projects as of right now, and these have been discussed with the board previously, we're looking at tuck pointing at Eisenhower. We're also looking at exterior doors at Elmwood, and then some other smaller type projects to equate to that. And the majority of those dollars will go to the tuck pointing at Eisenhower. And then a lot of the remaining part of that is for the exterior doors at Elmwood. The biggest question that we have, and this is what Patrick and Andy will be doing, is they're going to be setting up a time to meet with the facilities committee to determine if the board were to choose to move forward with additional capital projects beyond the $250K that we have set aside in the budget because of the surplus that we had again this year. What would those projects be? And once we identify those projects, to bring that to the board to determine to the board, if we were to do some, how much more could we have, if at all, and maybe we won't. But I do think we need to have that direction from the facilities committee to determine, okay, if the board were to give us another, say, $250,000, $400,000, $500,000 because of the surplus, what projects would we choose to do so that we can at least get the bidding process out and going sooner than later, so that we at least can scope things out so that we're prepared to either break ground or start doing that work come spring or heading into next summer. So really that is the update that, again, Patrick and Andy will be setting aside a committee meeting with the facilities team, and then they bringing something back to the full board to determine if we were to move forward, these are some of the things that we'd be looking at. Does the board consent to moving forward with some additional projects or not? So, any questions on that? All right, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the COVID update.
Yeah, so I'm really pleased to say that we reached our goal last week of getting back to face-to-face 5 days a week, yet offering an alternative for families virtually. And while we're not getting it perfect, what I can tell you is things are going quite well, and that's due in large part to everybody that's involved, and that includes parents, families, the students themselves, and our staff. And I have to tell you, all of the people that helped plan and putting things in place prior to the school year, that, we had this vision and we had no clue, really. I mean, we had our best guess. We also learned from our mistakes from last spring. And for the most part, we think we're doing a good job of getting things back to as normal as possible. Specifically, I did want to address that certainly the mask mandate was extended last week. And so that's certainly right now being challenged literally as of today. There was an injunction filed, I believe, by Will, an organization from, I think, somewhere in Milwaukee. And so certainly things could change. What I can tell you, though, is that despite all of the sacrifices, and I call them sacrifices because they sure are, we're doing things much differently. I mean, the fact that we have to sit this far apart, the fact that we're wearing masks, the fact that we have to get screened before we walk in. We were just sitting in a room that had plexiglass up, and despite those sacrifices, kids and staff are not being infected while at school or during school events. that we have evidence of that, and that's based on the COVID cases that we do have, and which are minimal. And any of the COVID cases that we are experiencing are mainly occurring because of things that are happening outside of the school district. And so it seems as though our mitigating efforts are working. And so, will we see increases? We have already. But they're not dramatic, they're not drastic, and we're making the adjustments. A lot of it has to do with quarantining. There's really not a lot of COVID cases. I think per the dashboard, if I recall correctly, and don't quote me on this, and maybe Dave, Cody, you can kind of help me, but we had, I believe, one positive staff member, and then I believe we had 3 students that were positive, but again, all were acquired while not on school campus or during a school event. Same with the quarantines. Our quarantines increased one week to the next week by about 10. But again, a lot of those quarantines are happening because of a spouse or because of something that happened outside of school. So I really appreciate the fact that our staff and our students are being as diligent as they are. You heard from Gigi earlier today that they're following what needs to be done, and she's going to be a model for the other kids. And I was actually quite surprised. Honestly, I didn't know how things would work as far as masking with students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. And in fact, in our original proposal, we didn't have that because we weren't sure, would kids really be able to do that? And they are. They're getting their mask breaks. When they're able to move away 6 feet apart, they can get a mini break as needed. But they are doing what they need to do to help us, stay safe, to stay open, and we continue to believe in that. I do want to also talk about busing. And, busing, when I related to COVID, we weren't sure what the real impact would be for busing. And in fact, we still are working on getting those numbers as we speak. If you recall, the first 2 weeks were a hybrid, so you really couldn't get a good sense of who was riding the bus and who wasn't. And then last week was the first week that we had all the students back that were supposed to be back face to face. Patrick will be working with the bus company to kind of get a better idea of bus ridership. As we get a little bit more consistency, we just need a little bit more time. And as you are aware, similar to what happened last year, we may need to make additional changes, possibly, so that we can be more efficient. But just because we have a smaller number of kids riding in a bus doesn't necessarily mean we eliminate that route or that run, because now we have 3 tiers that we have to, if you can't get that first tier on time, that's going to impact the second and the third tier. If you can't get that second tier on time, that's going to impact your third tier. So you have to keep those buses going, and we've been monitoring, literally on a day-to-day basis. Brady Ranke is taking tallies with the elementary principals on when buses arrive, if they're late, if they're too early in some cases, and we're making adjustments literally, as we speak, to the tune of hundreds of them thus far this fall. And but we will certainly bring this to the board before we make any changes, unlike we did last year. Last year we made some changes. We probably should have let the board know that we were going to be doing that prior to that. But again, so as of right now, our goal is to possibly look at making some run or route changes, some minor things at least on the front end, but if we need to make some substantial changes, we'll let the board know that. But that was really, other than that, I have been providing updates at least on a every other week basis to our families. Our staff, like I said, I've been meeting with our teaching staff. My goal is to either meet with them again or continue to get their feedback via Google Doc. But we constantly have feedback loops through our principals up through, Kelly and Patrick to my office and all the way back down. So again, we couldn't do it without our tremendous staff. And I'm talking, when I say staff, I truly mean everybody. While our teachers are doing tremendous things, our custodians, our maintenance staff, our tech staff, everybody, food and nutrition staff, they're doing incredible work. Any questions?
I I have one question regarding our virtual population, and what are we doing with like technology? If they have issues, are they allowed to bring their technology in, or how does that work with our virtual families?
Yes. Yeah, so just like we did last spring, they have the opportunity to kind of bring something in. First of all, they have a helpline that they can reach immediately. And then if they needed to bring something in, they could bring something in, and we would give them an alternative device. I think we had some subtle issues with the iPads early on, but since then, for the most part, things have been going quite well. But yes, they do have the option of immediately bringing something in and getting a replacement device literally on the spot.
And are we seeing an increase of like the tech now and like the technology because of the increase of devices?
Yes, I mean, if you, and that's actually something that I was going to be bringing to the board probably at the next meeting, is that we are, as you recall, we reduced our tech staff last year by 1 FTE. So we had a resignation, and given the circumstances, we didn't backfill that position. It's now, because now we've immersed 3 more grade levels of devices, and because we're using technology at a rate that we've never experienced before, we're not staffed properly to address the needs as timely as we would like. And so I will be bringing a recommendation and I was going to provide this in my update to the board of bringing that FTE back for technology until further notice. And so, and again, it's a matter of helping meet the needs in a timely manner, because the technology is only as good as the technology is working. And imagine Kelly's teaching a lesson in second grade, and all of a sudden she breaks her foot and now she's got to leave. Well, that's one thing, but we can bring in a substitute. But if I don't have my device, if I don't have paper, pencil, if I don't have my platform to be able to access all the things that I need, that's a game changer. And so that's why it's more crucial now than ever before that we have the proper support to meet the needs of our students. And the biggest thing is things are just lagging because of the amount of devices that we have. Again, you had 3 grade levels worth. That's a lot more devices. With trying to do it with less staff, it's not working. So, but it's not to say that we're not working hard and that they're not doing their best to get things done, because they certainly are. So,
Are there any other questions? We'll move on to item C, which is the first read of the replacement of policy 3250 with the revision to Neola 6144, investment of district funds. I'm going to turn it over to our chair of the Finance Committee to give us a brief description of what this revision entails.
Thanks, Amy. So we looked at our existing policy 3250, also entitled Investment of District Funds. And then we looked at the Neola policy, which is policy 6144 with the same name. And the language was almost identical. The Neola version indicated that the power would be vested for this purpose in the superintendent. And what we actually talked about in the meeting that we had about this was that we should probably have our CFO manage those activities. And I believe that revision was not included in the first read. So I think that is a correction that we have to make for next meeting when this is presented for a vote. But essentially, all the functions are the same as in our existing policy, but it is a little bit cleaned up with additional statutory references that were lacking in the original and current policy.
Thank you. Yes, we'll be bringing this to a vote for our next meeting. So if there's any questions between now and then, please direct them to the Finance Committee and Ms. Wonderchek as well for those questions. Item D is actions on items discussed in closed session.
Yes, I move to approve this employment services report as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Manley, a second by Ms. Schultz to approve the Employee Services Report. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Hands down. Ms. Wondercheck?
Aye.
Motion passes. This brings us to our future meetings and dates. Board meetings are generally held on the second and fourth Mondays beginning at 7, but our first meeting in October will be a Wednesday on October 14th due to there being no school on the 12th and 13th. So October 14th is a Wednesday. We will be here at 7 p.m. in the New Berlin West Commons. It is preceded with a 5:30 Finance Committee meeting. Our second October meeting will be October 26th. That will be here as well. It's at 7 p.m., preceded by a 5:30 Finance Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Ms. Crosby, before we do it, I apologize.
Yeah.
I do want to clarify that I misspoke. I mentioned grades K through 2, where all new technology is actually grades K through 3.
Okay.
So there are 4 grade levels, not just 3. Just want to clarify.
Okay, thanks. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Helmer, second by Mr. Kurth to adjourn. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Ms. Wondercheck?